If you've ever walked into your own home and felt like a stranger in your own life, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when the silence isn't peaceful, it's predatory. Mine came with a manila envelope on my kitchen counter and my mother's handwriting on a sticky note I used to find comforting. I wasn't supposed to be home that Tuesday. The surgery had been scheduled for 8 hours, a complex cardiac procedure that usually kept me at Houston Methodist until midnight. But sometimes the heart cooperates, sometimes it doesn't. This one did. I was home by 6 p.m., still in my scrubs, my surgical cap stuffed in my pocket, the antiseptic smell of the ore clinging to my hands like a second skin. The house felt wrong. Not messy, not broken, just wrong. You know that feeling when someone's been in your space without permission? The air itself feels violated. And there it was, sitting on my granite countertop like it belonged there. A thick manila envelope with "Urgent Victoria Chin" written across it in my mother's careful script. For a split second, maybe two, I thought it might be something normal. Medical documents, maybe insurance papers, something mundane. But that hope died fast. I tore it open, standing right there in my kitchen, surgical loops still hanging around my neck. Petition for emergency custody modification. Request for supervised visitation only for Victoria Chin regarding minor child Mason Wells. My hands didn't shake. Trauma surgery teaches you that shock comes in waves, not all at once. But what came next hit like a freight train. The supporting documents, witness statements, all claiming I was an unfit mother due to excessive work hours and emotional unavailability. And there, on page 12, were the signatures that stopped my world. Alan and Robert Chin, my parents, supporting Marcus's petition with a detailed statement about my concerning behavior patterns and inability to prioritize family over career. I read their words 3 times before they sank in. Victoria has always chosen her profession over her son. We have witnessed Mason's emotional distress during her frequent night shifts and weekend surgeries. The child needs stability she cannot provide. My mother, who used to brag about her surgeon daughter. My father, who called me his little miracle worker. Now they were painting me as negligent, absent, unfit. I set the papers down carefully like they might explode. Then I did what I'd done 1,000 times in the OR when everything went wrong. I got quiet, got focused, and started planning. That night I called my mother. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. "Victoria, we need to talk." I didn't give her the chance. "You signed papers saying I'm an unfit mother." Her sigh was practiced, rehearsed. "You're never home. Mason needs consistency. Marcus can provide that." "I save lives, Mom. Children's lives. I thought you understood that." "I understand that your son comes home to an empty house 4 nights a week. I understand that he spends more time with babysitters than with you." The line went quiet. Then my father's voice joined the call. "Victoria, this isn't about punishment. It's about what's best for Mason." What's best for Mason? They were taking my child and calling it love. I ended the call and sat in my empty house, the one they said Mason shouldn't have to come home to alone, and realized I was about to fight a war on 2 fronts. Against the man who once promised to love me, and against the people who brought me into this world. But here's the thing about surgeons: we don't just cut. We plan every incision, we anticipate every complication, and we never, ever operate without knowing exactly what we're going to find. 3 days later, they asked me to come to family dinner at my childhood home in Sugar Land. "Just to talk things through," my mother said. "Just family." I should have known it was an ambush. I should have known when I walked into my parents' dining room and saw Marcus sitting at the table, comfortable as you please, drinking coffee from the mug I used to use for Saturday morning breakfasts. "What is he doing here?" I asked, still standing in the doorway. My mother smoothed her blouse. "We thought it would be good to have everyone together. For Mason's sake." For Mason's sake. Everything was for Mason's sake except actually asking him what he wanted. Marcus gave me that smile, the one that used to make me feel special and now just made me feel sick. "Victoria, I know this is hard, but we all want what's best for him." I looked around the table. 3 people who had held my son, celebrated his birthdays, cheered at his soccer games. 3 people who were now united in taking him away from me. "This isn't dinner," I said. "This is an intervention." My father gestured to the chair across from them. "Please, Victoria. Sit." I didn't sit. I stood there in my mother's dining room, looking at the family photos on the wall, pictures of me graduating medical school, of Mason's first steps, of Christmas mornings when we were all still pretending to be happy. Marcus cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a diagnosis. "Victoria, you work 18-hour days. Mason barely sees you. When you are home, you're exhausted, distracted. He needs more than you can give. He needs his mother. He needs a parent who's present." This from my mother, the woman who used to wait up until I came home from the hospital, no matter how late. I stared at her. "I am present. I'm present when I'm teaching him about the heart during his science projects. I'm present when I'm showing him that women can save lives. I'm present when he tells people his mom is a surgeon and his chest puffs out with pride." "But you're not present for soccer practice," my father said quietly. "You're not present for parent-teacher conferences. You missed his last 2 birthday parties because of emergency surgeries." "I save children's lives, Dad. I save other people's Masons." "But what about our Mason?" my mother asked. "Our Mason. Not my Mason. Our Mason. Like he was community property." I looked at each of them one more time. 3 people who had decided I was broken and needed fixing. 3 people who thought love looked like their version of normal. I walked out. Didn't slam the door, didn't shout, didn't cry. Just left them sitting there in their perfect judgment. But in my car, before I started the engine, I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done since medical school. I started taking notes. Because if they wanted to play doctor with my life, I was going to show them what a real diagnosis looked like. That night, I requested every document in Marcus's custody filing. His lawyer tried to stall, but family court doesn't play games. When the files arrived, I spread them across my dining room table like X-rays, looking for the fractures they thought they'd hidden. The inconsistencies were immediate. They claimed I'd missed numerous school events, but the records showed I'd attended every major milestone. They said Mason was emotionally distressed, but his school counselor had never reported any concerns. They painted me as absent, but the nanny logs showed I was home most nights by 8 p.m. They were building a fiction and I was about to perform surgery on it. Next, I hired a private investigator. Not to dig up dirt, but to document truth. Camera footage from Mason's school pickup, restaurant receipts from our weekly father-son dinners that Marcus claimed didn't happen, even credit card records showing the trips to the science museum that supposedly never occurred. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez had been our neighbor for 8 years. She knocked on my door on a Thursday evening, holding a manila envelope that made my stomach drop. "I didn't want to get involved," she said, "but I thought you should see this." Inside were photos. Marcus and my parents at a restaurant, papers spread across the table between them. The timestamp showed this was 2 weeks before I'd received the custody petition. 2 weeks before their supposed emergency concerns about my fitness as a mother. Mrs. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "I was there with my sister. I heard your mother say something about teaching you a lesson. About showing you that family comes first." Teaching me a lesson. My own mother was helping my ex-husband take my child to teach me a lesson. "There's more," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Financial records. Your father wrote Marcus a check. $15,000. I saw him do it." That night, I sat in my living room looking at the photos, the bank records, the documented evidence of a conspiracy against my motherhood. And for the first time since this started, I smiled. Because here's what they forgot about surgeons: we don't just know how to cut. We know how to heal. And sometimes healing requires removing the diseased tissue so the healthy part can grow. I called my lawyer. I need to schedule a hearing. And I need to be ready for war. The morning of the custody hearing, I didn't choose my outfit to make a statement. I chose it because it was true. My white coat, pristine and pressed, with my hospital ID still clipped to the pocket. Dr. Victoria Chin, Chief of Pediatric Cardiothoracic Surgery. I wasn't hiding who I was anymore. The courthouse was busy, the usual chaos of family court on a Thursday morning. But when I walked in, conversations paused. Not because I was famous, but because I carried myself like someone who saves lives for a living. Someone who makes life and death decisions before most people have their morning coffee. Marcus was already seated with his lawyer, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. My parents sat behind him, my mother in her Sunday best, my father in his reading glasses, looking like the perfect grandparents they'd always appeared to be. They looked confident, comfortable, like they'd already won. The judge was younger than I expected, a woman with kind eyes and no patience for games. When she saw me, she nodded professionally and I could tell she'd read the files. Marcus's lawyer went first. Painted a picture of a workaholic mother who chose career over child, who was never home, who left her son with strangers while she prioritized other people's children over her own. It was a good story. It might have even been convincing if it had been true. My attorney stood up slowly, deliberately. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. First came the school records. Perfect attendance at every major event. Parent-teacher conference notes praising my involvement. Academic achievement awards showing Mason's consistent high performance. Then came the documentation. Photos of us at the Science Museum, the zoo, the baseball games. Credit card records showing our weekly dinner dates. Text messages between me and Mason, hundreds of them, showing a relationship that was close, consistent, and loving. But the nail in the coffin came in two parts. Part 1, the financial records. A $15,000 check from my father to Marcus, dated 1 week before the custody petition was filed. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Wells, can you explain this payment from the petitioner's parents? Marcus's lawyer fumbled. A gift, Your Honor. Family support during a difficult time. Interesting timing, the judge said dryly. Part 2, the photos from Mrs. Rodriguez. My parents and Marcus at dinner, papers spread between them, planning this whole thing weeks in advance. But the moment that changed everything was when my attorney played the recording. I have a witness statement, he said, along with audio documentation of a conversation that took place on March 15th. Mrs. Rodriguez had done more than just watch. She'd recorded, accidentally at first, then intentionally when she realized what she was hearing. My mother's voice filled the courtroom clear as day. Victoria needs to learn that family comes first. If we help Marcus with this custody thing, she'll finally understand what matters. My father's voice followed. The boy needs stability. If this makes her choose between the hospital and Mason, maybe she'll finally get her priorities straight. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I didn't turn around to look at my parents. I didn't need to. I could feel the shame radiating from their seats. The judge looked at me. Dr. Chin, do you have anything to add? I stood up slowly. Your Honor, I've spent my career saving children's hearts. I never thought I'd have to defend my own child's place in mine. The ruling came 30 minutes later. Full custody reinstated. Supervised visitation for Marcus until he could prove stability. And a restraining order preventing my parents from interfering in custody matters. But the real victory came 2 hours later, in a small conference room where Mason was waiting with a social worker. He looked up when I walked in and his whole face changed. Not relief, not happiness, but recognition. Like he was seeing his real mom for the first time in months. Did you win? He asked quietly. I knelt down to his level. We won, buddy. We won. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And in that moment I knew what redemption felt like. It's been 3 months since the hearing. Marcus moved back to Dallas. And my parents, they sent a letter last week. No apology, just hurt feelings about being embarrassed in public. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I finally didn't owe them an explanation. Mason and I are rebuilding. He doesn't flinch anymore when I get called in for emergency surgery. He knows the difference between being needed at work and being needed at home. Last weekend we were at the park near our house. The one where I used to push him on the swings when he was little. He was on the monkey bars showing off when he called out, "Mom, watch this." I looked up from my phone hospital emails that suddenly seemed less important, and watched my son cross those bars like he was flying. When he dropped down, he ran over, slightly out of breath. "Did you see?" "I saw everything," I said. He smiled, then got quiet for a moment. "Mom, are you really a famous doctor?" I laughed. "I'm not famous, baby. I just fix hearts." He thought about this seriously, then nodded. "Cool. Can you teach me how to do that?" "Fix hearts?" "Yeah. In case yours ever breaks again." I pulled him close, this wise little boy who'd watched his world fall apart and was already thinking about how to put things back together. "Deal," I whispered. "You know, people ask me all the time why I didn't fight back sooner. Why I didn't see the betrayal coming. Why I let them get so close to taking Mason away. Here's the truth. When the people who raised you decide you're the problem, you start to believe them. When they tell you that your love isn't enough, that your way isn't right, you begin to question everything you thought you knew about yourself. But sometimes, just sometimes, fighting back isn't about rage. It's about clarity. It's about looking at the facts, making the diagnosis, and performing the surgery your family needs, even if it means cutting out the disease. I didn't win because I was perfect. I won because I was present. I won because I had receipts. And I won because my son deserved better than a family tree full of people who thought love was a competition. Some days I still think about my parents. I wonder if they see my name in medical journals or hear about my surgeries saving children's lives. Do they feel proud? Do they feel regret? Or worse, do they feel nothing at all? Mason asked me yesterday if he could bring my stethoscope for show and tell. I let him. He wore it around his neck like it was made of gold. "I'm going to tell them my mom saves kids' hearts," he said proudly, "but also that she makes really good pancakes." I cried a little when he wasn't looking, because that's who I always wanted to be. Not just Dr. Victoria Chin, chief of surgery, but Mom. The one who stayed. The one who showed up. The one who never stopped fighting even when everyone else walked away. So if you're reading this and your family made you feel like you had to choose between who you are and who they wanted you to be, if they told you that your dreams were selfish, if they abandoned you for refusing to shrink down to their size, then hear me clearly. You don't need their permission to be whole. Some of us were never the favorite child. We were the ambitious ones, the different ones, the ones who wanted more than Sunday dinners and small talk. But here's what I learned. Different doesn't mean wrong, and ambitious doesn't mean heartless. Sometimes it just means we were building something they never saw coming. Now it's your turn. If someone tried to use your love against you, if your own family became the enemy, if you've ever had to fight for your right to be both successful and loving, tell me about it. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from. Because I promise you, someone else reading this is fighting the same battle. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone, that's where the healing begins. If you loved this Revenge Tempest, subscribe to my channel Revenge Tempest for more. Comment where you're watching from.